The night was calm when Nimra Khan boarded Flight 782, a routine journey that she had taken many times before. She worked long hours all week and her body felt heavy, begging for rest. Row 12 was her little corner of peace, a window seat with soft light falling through the half-closed shade. As the flight took off, she leaned back, closed her eyes, and let the quiet vibration of the engines pull her into sleep. Around her, passengers settled in with movies, snacks, and blankets, unaware that this flight would soon test every bit of courage in the cabin. For the first hour, everything stayed peaceful. The plane moved smoothly through a clear sky, and Nimra slept so deeply that even the small bumps didn't wake her. But then a sudden shudder ran through the aircraft, sharp enough to make several passengers look up. The seatbelt lights blinked on. A few whispers spread, but most people brushed it off as normal turbulence. Then came the moment that changed everything. The intercom crackled. A voice, strained and uneven, came through the speakers. It was the captain, but something in his tone sounded wrong. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is any licensed pilot on board, please make yourself known to the crew immediately." The cabin froze. Passengers stared at one another, unsure if they heard correctly. The words hit the air with a strange heaviness, as if the entire flight had suddenly stepped into a nightmare. Mothers held their children closer. A man in row 9 stood halfway up, confused. Flight attendants exchanged looks that revealed fear they were trying hard to hide. Nimra stirred at the sound, slowly opening her eyes. She blinked, still half asleep, trying to understand why everyone looked so tense. The announcement replayed in her mind, each word clearer than the last. A pilot? Why would the captain ask for a pilot? Something was seriously wrong. The crew hurried down the aisle, scanning faces, asking questions in hushed voices. Nimra sat up straight, her heartbeat rising without knowing why. She felt the atmosphere shift around her, the air heavier, the whispers sharper, the fear spreading like a shadow. She didn't know it yet, but the call that woke her was about to pull her into the most dangerous decision of her life. The cabin. Crew gathered near the front, speaking quickly in low voices. Their stiff movements and tense expressions told the passengers that something far more serious was happening than simple turbulence. Nimra watched them closely, feeling the rising panic around her. Parents whispered prayers. A teenager clutched his armrest, and an elderly couple held each other's hands tightly. Finally, one of the flight attendants stepped forward, her voice carefully controlled but trembling underneath. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain is unresponsive and the co-pilot has sustained an injury during a mechanical malfunction. We are trying to stabilize the situation." The words hit the cabin like a shockwave. Gasps filled the air. People turned pale. A woman in row 7 began crying softly, while another man demanded answers. The attendants tried to calm everyone, but it was clear they were barely holding themselves together. The aircraft continued flying on autopilot, but warning alarms occasionally chimed from the cockpit, clear reminders that autopilot wouldn't hold forever. As Nimra listened, her heart began to pound for a different reason. She knew exactly what those alarms meant. She knew exactly what unresponsive captain could lead to. She knew too much. Because this was once her world. Years ago, Nimra had trained to become a pilot. She had been passionate, talented, and dedicated, one of the best in her batch. Flying wasn't just a job for her. It was the only thing that made her feel free. But everything changed the night her father, also a pilot, died in a storm while flying a small rescue aircraft. The news shattered her. She couldn't step into a cockpit again without feeling the weight of his loss. Eventually, she walked away from the dream she had chased since childhood. And now, fate had placed her on this flight. The crew continued asking passengers if anyone had aviation experience. Each time, the answer was a fearful no. Nimra kept her head down, torn between the life she left behind and the lives that now hung in the balance. Her palms felt cold, Her breathing grew shallow. She could feel the familiar tension of a cockpit pressing against her memories. She wasn't ready to face that world again, not at 34, not after all she had lost. But the plane needed a pilot. And the truth she tried to bury was rising inside her, stronger with every passing second. Another violent tremor ripped through the plane, stronger than any before. Overhead bins rattled. A woman screamed. A baby cried so loudly it cut through every other sound. Oxygen masks trembled above the passengers, ready to drop. Flight 782 was no longer just unstable. It was in trouble. The flight attendants tried to keep everyone calm, but their rushed steps and shaking hands told the truth. They hurriedly checked on passengers, but their eyes kept darting toward the locked cockpit door. Nimra felt her chest tighten as the anxiety in the cabin rose. Like a wave threatening to crash, her fingers gripped the armrest. Her mind pulled her back into old memories she tried for years to bury: simulator drills, emergency alarms, her father's proud smile when she passed her first test. She could almost hear him saying, in the sky, "Courage matters more than fear." But she had spent so long running from the sky that she wasn't sure she remembered how to return to it. Suddenly, the plane jerked sideways, sending a jolt of terror through the passengers. A water bottle rolled down the aisle. People began shouting for help. A man stood up and yelled, "We're going to crash." The panic hit Nimra like a spark that ignited something deep inside her. She realized that no one else was going to stand up. No one else knew what the alarms meant. No one else knew how quickly a situation like this could spiral. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. Fear didn't leave, but something stronger pushed through. With a quiet resolve, Nimra unbuckled her seatbelt. The passenger beside her looked stunned as she stood. She didn't shout, didn't panic, didn't try to explain. She simply stepped into the aisle and approached the nearest flight attendant. I might be able to help," she said softly. The attendant blinked in disbelief. "Are you a pilot?" Nimra hesitated for only a second, then nodded. "I used to be. And I remember enough." Hope flashed across the attendant's eyes as she grabbed Nimra's hand and rushed her forward. Passengers watched with a mixture of fear and relief as the woman from row 12, the quiet one, the one who had been sleeping, walked toward the cockpit. As the door opened and she stepped inside, the alarms, the flashing lights, the smell of overheated electronics, all of it hit her at once. But she didn't step back. She sat in the pilot's seat. For the first time in years, Nimra Khan took control of an aircraft. Nimra sat in the captain's seat, staring at a cockpit filled with flashing warnings and relentless alarms. The air felt warm from the stressed machinery, and a faint buzzing came from the damaged control panel. The co-pilot, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, gave her a weak nod as the crew tended to him. His voice trembled as he said, "Hydraulics, partially failed landing gear. Stuck." It was worse than Nimra expected. Her hands hovered over the controls, trembling for a moment, but only a moment. When she wrapped her fingers around the yoke, a strange calm settled inside her. Fear was there, but beneath it, old instincts began to wake. She pressed the radio button, her voice steady but low. "ATC, this is Flight 782. Captain is unconscious. I am acting pilot, requesting emergency landing." The controller's shock was obvious, but he quickly switched to guiding her. Nimra focused on every instruction, every altitude reading, every warning tone. Outside the cockpit windows, clouds drifted past like silent witnesses to the chaos inside. The plane shook again, dipping slightly, and Nimra fought to stabilize it. The passengers screamed behind the door as the turbulence worsened. Her muscles tightened as she adjusted the flaps manually, every movement requiring strength because of the hydraulic failure. Sweat gathered on her forehead, not just from the heat, but from the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. As they neared the airport, strong winds pushed the plane sideways. Nimra clenched her jaw and countered the drift. The runway came into view below, a single strip of hope in the darkness. But the landing gear still wouldn't deploy. Alarms flashed a bright red gear unsafe. A TC said, "You may need to attempt manual override." Nimra's heart pounded. She reached down, pulling the backup lever with all her strength. It resisted. Pain shot up her arm. She pulled again, harder this time. The plane shook violently. Then, a heavy metallic clunk. The gear locked into place. Passengers burst into tears of relief. Though they didn't know the landing would still be brutal, the descent steepened. The ground rushed closer. Wind battered the aircraft. Nimra held the yoke so tightly, her knuckles turned white. She whispered to herself, "Steady, steady." The wheels hit the runway with a thunderous slam, sparks erupting beneath them. The aircraft skidded, swerved, screeched, but Nimra kept fighting the controls, guiding the metal giant through its desperate slide toward safety. The plane slowed more, and finally, it began to stop. For a long moment after the plane came to a full stop, there was only silence. Not the peaceful kind, but a stunned, breathless silence. The kind that comes when people realize they're still alive after expecting the opposite. The engines hummed softly, the lights flickered, and in row 12, a forgotten water bottle rolled back into place as if the world itself exhaled. Then the first sob broke the quiet. A mother clutched her child and cried into his hair. A man who had been shouting earlier now covered his face, shaking with relief. Flight attendants hugged each other, their eyes red. Even the injured co-pilot, barely conscious, let out a weak smile when he saw the plane resting safely on the runway. But Nimra didn't hear the applause starting behind her. She didn't hear the passengers chanting her name. She didn't even realize tears were streaming down her own face. She sat frozen in the captain's seat, staring at the runway lights stretching out before her, breathing in the heavy scent of overheated electronics and adrenaline. For a moment, she wasn't on Flight 782. She was a young cadet again, sitting in a small training aircraft next to her father, listening to him say that flying wasn't just about skill, it was about heart. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I did it, Baba," letting years of guilt melt like ice under sunlight. Paramedics arrived quickly, rushing inside to help the captain and co-pilot. Fire trucks surrounded the plane, lights flashing like 100 beating hearts. But the real moment came when Nimra finally stepped out of the cockpit and into the cabin. Every passenger stood. The entire plane erupted into applause, loud, raw, emotional, filled with gratitude that words could never fully express. Some people clapped with shaking hands, others cried openly. A teenage boy recorded her with trembling fingers. A woman whispered, "That's her. The one who saved us." Nimra felt overwhelmed, almost too small for the moment. Then a little girl from row 6 walked up to her, holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. She tugged Nimra's sleeve gently and said, in the softest voice, "Are you an angel?" Nimra knelt down, wiping her tears with a shaky laugh. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who couldn't stay sitting." The girl hugged her tightly, a simple, innocent hug, but strong enough to stitch together the part of Nimra's heart she thought would never heal. In the days that followed, the story spread across the world, the miracle landing by the woman in row 12. News anchors praised her. Pilots saluted her. Airlines called her a hero. But Nimra avoided interviews. She didn't want fame. She wanted peace, and she finally had it. For the first time in years, she looked at the sky not with fear, but with pride. She had faced the storm she had been running from, and she had won.